I am taking the greatest player ever, the greatest first baseman ever, the third greatest center fielder ever, and the fourth greatest center fielder ever over the best closer. I'm not backing down on this, Buster, not even to you, no matter how much you yell at me.
Okay, so, but the question is, if David Cohn comes to the dark side and puts Rivera ahead of Jeter, are you going to call him an idiot on national television?
No, I'm just not going to listen to any more Sunday night broadcasts. That's it.
Tim Kurkjian, who covers baseball for ESPN and does a phenomenal job on all the shows that he works on, including Baseball Tonight, Tim, on Sunday. That may have been your best performance ever on a Baseball Tonight this past Sunday.
Yeah, it's really funny, Buster. I flew to Bristol on Sunday to do a show. I started watching games at 12:30, even though it wasn't a game on until 1. I watched until 7 o'clock. There was no show at 7 o'clock because the U.S. Open ran long, as we anticipated. So I went all the way to Bristol, and I didn't do anything except.
But I know on Sunday night, at least I knew they held you over to be on SportsCenter on Sunday evening, right? After the Cubs-Giants game.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's anything more irrelevant than doing something other than football on the first football Sunday of the season. So no one was going to watch the show anyway, which is just so it's appropriate. We didn't have a show because the tennis ran late. So can't tell. It's like taking batting practice or going through layup lines and not being able to play in the game. It just doesn't.
Or having a rain out, right?
Right. It's a little discouraging.
All right. Look, Bo Bichette, it doesn't seem to matter if he's taking batting practice or not. He's been going absolutely crazy for the Blue Jays. It's a 2-run homer last night. I do radio in Toronto every week, and I mentioned this morning that the guy he reminds me of in 2 ways is Derek Jeter, and I want to, see if you agree with me on this. One, post-game interviews, Derek, when I covered him as a beat writer, he famously was boring. In fact, journalism students I've told through the years when they've asked me, what's it like to cover Derek Jeter? And I say, he's intentionally boring because he doesn't want to create any stories. So he would dumb down his answers. Bo's post-game interviews seem to be like that. But the other thing, other reason why he reminds me of Jeter, Tim, is because he seems to be at his best when he's just aggressive and he's hacking. And he's hitting the ball all over the field. A lot of damage to right field. Maybe the bit of a difference between the two. Bo's not as consistent as Derek was, and he's got a little bit more pop than Derek does. What do you think?
I see the comparisons. I think he's at his best when he's swinging it, just like you're saying. I watched that home run last night that he hit. I did not think that was going out, and it did, showing you how much pop he has. Jeter is bigger to me physically than Bo Bichette is, but Bichette is doing stuff that very few shortstops have done. Like anytime, like only three Blue Jays shortstops have a 20 homer season, and he's one of them. He's got a couple, of course. He just finished the stretch with he had 10 extra base hits in 5 games. No Blue Jay had ever done that. And in the month of September, he leads the major leagues in RBIs, runs scored, and hits, and is tied with Mike Trout in home runs. He's amazing. He always reminds me, though, of his dad, who I covered quite a bit for while I was working at Sports Illustrated. Dante told me once during the absolute prime of his career, he said, every day I come to the ballpark, I wonder if today is the last day I'll be able to hit in the big leagues. Is today the last day that I'll still be a good hitter? Because tomorrow I might not be anymore. That's how great baseball is. That's how difficult baseball is. And maybe that was his mechanism to make sure he showed up every day saying, don't lose it today. I think there's some of Dante Bichette in Bo Bichette, that he shows up every day saying, I got to be great today because tomorrow it might be over. That's what.
Yeah, when he was struggling earlier this year, and I don't pretend to know him, well, don't see him on a daily basis, not in the clubhouse on a daily basis. But Bo strikes me as being someone who can put a lot of pressure on himself. Yes.
Yes, and I think his dad has something to do with that, not intentionally. It's just when your dad was a really good player and your dad coached you growing up, and you got that name, and it's a pretty good name in baseball. I think there's something to that, and yeah, I think he always wants to prove that he's better than the next guy. And they were talking about moving him to second base. I think that angered him a couple of years ago. Look, he's a quality major league defensive shortstop who can really hit. And the Blue Jays are now, help me here, tied in. They're in first for the first wild card now. They're red hot, and he's the biggest reason why.
Yeah, and I think there's going to be a lot of conversation down the stretch about which seeding you actually want, right? If you're one of those wild card teams, and my feeling would be, obviously, if you're the Blue Jays, you want that first series at home. There's a potential, not only do you have that great crowd in Toronto, but then other teams might have guys who are not going to be allowed to play. They're going to be on the restricted list. But I'd say the one first, and then, potentially if the Blue Jays are the 6th seed, because the Mariners, the Blue Jays, the Jays are all bunched together, there's a potential for the Blue Jays to be the 6th seed, which means that they would probably play Cleveland. If Cleveland holds on the American League Central, I don't say that with a lot of confidence. If I'm Toronto, that's not a series that scares me, because I think Cleveland struggles to score runs. The one series I think you don't want, Tim, if you're in that first round, you don't want to play in Seattle. Do you agree with me?
Yeah, Seattle, as we know, hasn't been to the playoffs since 2001. That crowd there is fantastic. The energy in that ballpark is ridiculous these days, and they're a very dangerous team. Power arms out of the bullpen, 2, maybe 3 quality starting pitchers for a short series, an offense that's underrated. And again, I think they're a very good defensive team, and we don't measure by errors, but they have the fewest errors in the major leagues. They're a complete team. They're going to the playoffs, and I think they have a lot of momentum with the way they've played lately. I wouldn't want any part of a 3 or 2 game series in Seattle.
And I think you'll agree with me, too, that Julio Rodriguez looks like one of those guys, maybe the way, since we're doing a lot of Jeter stuff comparisons this morning, like Jeter, I think he's going to absolutely thrive on a big stage.
Yeah, again, we saw that in the home run derby, Buster, which is a home run derby. It's an exhibition at the All-Star game, but there are a lot of guys that wilt even during that because the pressure's too great. And he was the opposite. He didn't just wilt, he stood up. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen in the postseason. They have a good offensive team, and he's their best offensive player. He's right in the middle of it all the time. Another reason to like them. I only mildly disagree with you about Cleveland, Buster. I mean, if you can go Bieber and Tristan McKenzie 1-2, I think you got a chance in a short series against anybody. And I wouldn't want to play Cleveland either. In fact, I wouldn't want to play Toronto in Toronto, and the Rays with the way they pitch and with Franco back, I wouldn't want to play them either. So we joke all the time that the AL doesn't look like a great wild card situation, and yet I wouldn't want to play any of those teams given what some of them can do.
I'm going to ask you about the rule changes and the reaction you've heard around the sport. But first, about Jeter, I'm just going to tell you that I've been working on David Cohn on this whole question about who should be on the Yankees Mount Rushmore. You've got Derek Jeter ahead, or in the top 5, I believe, in your pecking order for the Yankees Mount Rushmore. But I've been making the case to you for years that Mariano Rivera should be ahead of Jeter. I think I'm beginning to sway David Cohn toward my side. Like, we've had about 8 conversations about this, Tim. And on the drive back to the hotel in Chicago on Sunday night, he related how all the Braves guys, Smoltz, Glavine, Chipper Jones, those guys all believe they would have won as many World Series the Yankees did back in the 90s if they had been the team with Rivera.
I remember I called you an idiot on national TV about 10 years ago.
No,
Buster.
I called you an idiot.
No, I think I called you an idiot too. And well, I'm sure we both deserved it. All right. He's not on the Mount Rushmore. My Mount Rushmore is Ruth, in order: Ruth, Gehrig, Mantle, DiMaggio, Yogi 5th, Jeter 6th, Mariano 7th, Whitey Ford 8th. So I have 2 Mount Rushmores, and Jeter and Rivera are on the second. Now, look, don't think I don't understand what Jeter meant, and don't think I don't understand that Mariano's the greatest closer ever, and there isn't a close second. He's the only guy that there isn't a close second at his position. I understand all that. I'm just saying, when you're gauging a position player, four of the greatest position players of all time, you can't put a closer in with four of the greatest position players of all time.
All I'm going to say is, and we talked about this in the car, Carl Ravitch is chiming in, Eduardo Perez was chiming in, Mariano Rivera, in his postseason career, 141 innings, the equivalent of 2 full seasons, he allowed 2 home runs. He was a weapon that nobody else had, Tim, in October. And we're talking about a Yankee franchise where everything is measured by what you do in October.
Buster, I'm well aware of what he did in October. Jeter had 200 hits in October. Babe Ruth was a pretty good October player, and so was DiMaggio. Mickey Mantle, until we went to 1,000 different playoff rounds, had the most home runs in World Series play or postseason play than anyone ever. It's not like I'm taking 4 guys off the street. I am taking the greatest player ever, the greatest first baseman ever, the 3rd greatest center fielder ever, and the 4th greatest center fielder ever over the best closer. I'm not backing down on this, Buster, not even to you, no matter how much you yell at me.
Okay, so, but the question is, if David Cohn comes to the dark side and puts Rivera ahead of Jeter, are you going to call him an idiot on national television?
No, I'm just not going to listen to any more Sunday night broadcasts. That's it. And that's a joke.
All right. So we talked a lot on the Sunday night broadcast about the rule changes that are coming up. What's been surprising to me, Tim, is that the folks I've talked to in clubhouses, there's a lot more agreement on these than I anticipated. There's a lot more people saying, yeah, let's give it a shot. Yeah, we're okay with the pitch clock. I think when the idea of the pitch clock was first introduced years ago, or the concept of it, you talk to players and they were absolutely, this is ridiculous, this is stupid. And let's not kid ourselves. Next spring, when some guy has a bad game or gets off to a slow start, he's going to complain about the pitch clock. That's just human nature. But generally speaking, I felt that, folks within the game are okay with it in a way that I didn't expect. What about you?
Yeah, that's what I've heard too. I was watching the Jason Stark, Doug Glanville, Starkville podcast the other day, and they had Joey Votto on. And Jason, our dear friend, said, Joey, you're kind of a deliberate hitter. You like to back out. And Joey stopped Jason right in the middle of it and said, look, I'm taking whatever they give me, okay? But he said, if you need me to be ready in 10 seconds to hit, I'll be ready in 10 seconds to hit. And I think the same is going to go for our pitchers. Eventually, they're going to figure out they're going to have to speed this up and they're going to have to go faster. And I think they can do it. I know they can do it if they are forced to do it. If there's a penalty involved, if there's a balk involved or a ball involved, they are going to make sure that they deliver the ball in the right amount of time. I think this is worth a try because all we hear about is there's not enough action and their games last too long. The players themselves need to recognize, and I think they do, that our game needs an adjustment, and I think it's coming.
David Ross, the Cubs manager, spoke to us before the game, not surprisingly, because I can remember those days when he was catching for John Lester, and when Lester would start to gripe about the umpire, he'd go out to the mound and he'd chew Lester and say, let's go, let's pick up the pace. David Ross told us in a pregame meeting that he absolutely believes that an enhanced pace helps the pitcher. He feels like that it makes the hitters on the defensive. And it was interesting to me that Gabe Kapler, when we went over and talked to the Giants manager before the game on Sunday, he felt the exact same way. He said, look, when I face those guys who work fast, and he mentioned Mark Burley, who's famously one of the fastest workers of all time, he said, I felt like that those guys were throwing downhill at me, like they had some momentum as they went along. I know when this conversation started at the outset, a lot of the people complaining were actually pitchers because they felt like, look, I need to do what I can do to get ready to throw each pitch. We're seeing this generation of relievers who come in and throw 1,500 sliders. They'll circle behind the mound and they'll take time between pitches. Folks that I've spoken with the last 4 or 5 days really believe that this could actually turn out to be a good thing, not only for pace, but actually for pitchers.
Yeah, and at the Sunday night game, we saw how quickly Wade Miley worked, which was great, and it helps the pitcher. I totally agree. And remember what Eduardo said on the broadcast. He said, these are the guys that drove me crazy,
Yep.
not just a soft throwing left-hander, but someone that worked really fast. He basically said, I enjoyed getting myself ready for an at bat. And if somebody is going too fast, I didn't enjoy that. I think the hitters could be affected even more than the pitchers, like you say. But again, some of our really slow working pitchers are going to have to make an adjustment. Otherwise, they're going to be in some trouble. But again, facing trouble, they will adjust.
So after the Dodgers won on Sunday, in theory, they had clinched a playoff spot. That's what they were told. That's what we were told. I saw pictures. I didn't see video of this, but I saw pictures where the Dodgers toasted each other because they clinched a playoff spot, which at this point, 10 straight years in the postseason, isn't that big of a deal. But then we got word yesterday from Major League Baseball, oh, wait, sorry about that. They didn't actually clinch until the Dodgers clinched last night. Have you seen anything comparable to that in your time covering baseball?
Well, I'm actually not shocked that that happened. I did a game with Roxy Bernstein the other day on the radio, and he was with Dave Roberts doing another game. And this is not a criticism. Dave Roberts did not know what the Dodgers record was going into a game. Like 90-40, he didn't know what their record was because he doesn't care about their record. It's the biggest cliche ever. The only thing that matters is tonight's game. We have to win tonight. But for a major league manager to not know how many wins they have or not know what their record is, I found that interesting. So that kind of connects to what this is all about. They were going to clinch tonight or the night before. It's no big deal. 10 in a row. I get it. I just remember, though, I've told you this story, Buster. The Orioles in the mid 70s were like 50 over, and they lost a game in September in Kansas City, and they're leaving Kansas City to go to another city. And Earl Weaver growls to no one in particular. He said, "Damn, it's hard to stay 50 games over 500." And that shows you how few teams have ever done that. But Earl knew every record, every game of whatever was going on. Dave Roberts doesn't. And that just means they're not worried about whether they're going to win 116 games. They just want to win the World Series, and whatever comes first comes first.
So Ben Walker works for the Associated Press, right?
Of course.
Okay, so he's in the middle of the story I'm going to tell you from 1998 when you had the Yankee team, which was running away, had a huge lead. They finished the season with 114 wins and 48 losses, the regular season. Then they blitzed through the postseason. They finished with 125 wins. The Yankees that year are playing the Mariners in a series at Yankee Stadium. And I remember this very clearly. It was a Saturday afternoon game. The game's played, the ballpark empties out, and all of a sudden from the front row of the press box, Ben Walker says out loud, "I think they clinched a playoff spot." And I was like, huh? That's not right. I don't think they have. And then he explained because the Mariners, or excuse me, the Rangers and some other team were going to play each other. It was a guaranteed loss or something like that. And he was right. And nobody knew it. Nobody knew. The Yankees clinched a playoff spot that day on August 30th, and nobody knew it. And so my story the next day was on a sleepy Sunday morning was to greet the Yankees as they came in the clubhouse and say, "Hey, congratulations, Gabrosius. You made the playoffs. What do you think?" But no one had figured it out until Ben Walker started going through the math in the press box.
Well, first off, no surprise that Ben Walker would figure that out. He's smarter than the average bear. And yes, look, when you're clinching at the end of August, Buster, when we're talking about magic numbers at the beginning of September, that kind of takes away. You're too good at that point, and I think it takes away some of the drama. But that's great. And only in baseball could somebody say, "Hey, those teams are playing each other. Somebody's got to lose. The Yankees are in."
Yeah. And by the way, it made for a challenge in writing an artful game story from that Saturday because I had to write that the Yankees made the playoffs, but I didn't have any player quotes and no reaction from anybody.
Right.
And this is before the time when everyone was texting and had cell phones.
Yes.
Before you go, I want to ask you about Mike Trout, who's on this unbelievable roll. I feel like it's a little bit like the Pujols run at the end. I'm happy for Mike Trout that he's reminding everybody here in these last 7 games, home run in each of these games, a chance tonight to tie the record of homers in 8 straight games. I'm happy he's reminding everybody, yeah, he's still here and he's still pretty good.
Yeah, he's got 35 homers and 365 at bats. Just put those numbers together. He is still the best player in baseball, and I think it angered him when everyone said, "Oh, he's got a back injury, he may never play again," and all this stuff. And he came back and he's hit rocket after rocket. He's got 11 homers since he came off the injured list. You ran the numbers today on Twitter. It's absurd what he's doing. Just another reminder, you can't pitch to him when he's really good. And even though he doesn't run like he used to, and maybe he's not the greatest center fielder like he used to be, he's still the best player in the game, and he's proving it again. It's just absurd. I was on the Griffey watch, by the way, when he went 8 in a row. I was there for number 9 when he didn't hit a homer, and I was around Mattingly during his 8 in a row. So it's quite a feat. And even though a bunch of guys have done 7, if he gets to 8 tonight, oh boy, that would be really something to watch. Imagine, Buster, we got a guy going for 700 homers in our pools. We got a guy going for 8 homers in 8 games. We've got 2 guys, Judge and Goldschmidt, going for the Triple Crown, all within the last 3 weeks of the season. I would say there's a lot of interest in baseball heading down the stretch.
Mike Trout might hit his 400th career homer before his 32nd birthday next year. Probably not, but it's going to be close. Last one about Trout. And I don't think I'm giving away any secrets here, Taylor, but it looks like we're going to have Trout on the podcast next week. He's always been great. I've always loved to deal with him. So have you. He's so gracious with his time. And I put in the request yesterday and said, look, we'd love to have Trout on the podcast. And I got back from the Angels. Yeah, Mike definitely wants to do it. But how about the beginning of next week? And the more that I processed that, I thought, you know what? He's so superstitious. He doesn't want me asking him about this streak of home runs. Are you buying that?
Yes, and you would jinx him, Buster, because that's what you do to people, including to me. It's typical Mike Trout. He's a baseball player. He likes to help people. He's very gracious with his time, as you said, but he's also, I've got work to do here. I've got a record to break. Even though it's never about him, I don't think he wants anything getting in the way of this streak that he's got going.
Yeah, before every game, he texts his mom, hey, I'm headed out on the field. I love you. And it's in a group text with his parents, and he will sit in his locker and wait until they answer back. And it has to be in the right sequence. I think his sister's involved. I think his brother might be involved, his dad, but there has to be a specific sequence of text before he feels good about running out on the field. That's Mike Trout's great, and he's also superstitious. All right, Tim, thanks for doing this.
Okay, Buster. Talk to you next week.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.